You've been talking about the importance of building a healthy workplace culture and battling bro culture for a long time. And now via Thrive, you're actually working with companies from JP Morgan to Airbnb to Uber, of course, to compel cultural changes from the top down. What's been the most surprising thing so far of actually being in the trenches with these companies?
The good news is that more and more companies are realizing that building healthy cultures is not a nice to have. It's essential for the bottom line. The consequences of a broken culture affect business metrics like recruitment, retention, attrition, healthcare costs. So companies are taking it much more seriously. You've all heard the phrase, culture eats strategy for breakfast, etc. But in reality, finally now we are recognizing the importance of healthy cultures where there are structures and processes in place to immediately surface problems and complaints and deal with them.
So you've pledged sweeping cultural changes at Uber. How optimistic are you that Dara Khosrowshahi, the new CEO, can make these changes and fast enough?
The changes are already happening. Leanne Hornsey, the head of human resources at Uber, has been fantastic at implementing all the Eric Holder recommendations. 47 of them, which were unanimously approved by the board, have been implemented or are in process of being implemented. And they were in three categories: structures and processes in place, management trainings, because Uber had over 60% of managers who were first-time managers without all the appropriate training, and then governance changes so that there is more independent oversight from the board.
It's been a long road since that blog post from Susan Fowler, and I'm curious what lessons you think you learned, what mistakes you or the board may have made through this process.
A lot of lessons. I think the most important lesson is to recognize that a company has to stand for more than hypergrowth. Obviously, Uber has been a phenomenal success in terms of its growth. Over 60 countries, in growing every year exponentially. We had our 5 billionth ride around the world. So what is now important to recognize and to achieve is also a culture which is sustainable. And when we change some of the cultural values, for example, the cultural value of being always on, or the cultural value of working harder, smarter, longer. Working smarter and longer, we now have the data to prove it, are not compatible. People need time to recharge. And also we have the evidence that when people are burnt out, they act out. We all know from ourselves, when we are running on empty, we are more reactive, we are less empathetic, and empathy and collaboration are essential in building teams.
Do you see Travis Kalanick, does he have a role to play beyond being just a board member?
He is on the board, and he's very active. He obviously built Uber to the juggernaut that it is now, and he passed the baton on to Dara. He was the one who introduced Dara at the All Hands when he took over as CEO, and it was a very nice transition of power. And Dara has been amazing at dealing with all the problems, whether it's what's happening in London with the suspension of Uber's license, or the deal that is in process, we hope, with SoftBank. He has been a great leader, confident and willing to show humility in appropriate times, and very committed to building a thriving culture as well as a thriving company.
You mentioned the situation that Uber is facing in London, multiple legal probes elsewhere. What approach do you hope to see Dara take to regulation and the law, really, around the world going forward?
Well, as he said himself in a very beautiful open letter to Londoners, we need to do better at serving the communities where where Uber exists around the world. We need to make sure that we add value to communities beyond the value we already add in terms of mobility, in terms of jobs, which is not at all to be underestimated, but we need to also be there for the people we serve, starting with drivers. You know, the launch of 180 days of change, which started with allowing tipping for drivers, was intended to rebuild the relationship with drivers.
Would you say that the fractiousness that we saw from the outside on the board is changing, that the board is coming together?
The board is in a good place at the moment. We are now 11, we've grown, and if the SoftBank deal goes through, there are new governance measures that are going to be put in place, which include additional independent board members, an independent chair. All these things are really going to make sure that Uber has a world-class governance ahead of the IPO, which now we are aiming it will be before 2019.
And we understand that you became a really close confidant of Travis's as he went through this and the company went through this. What's your relationship with Travis like now?
Travis is a friend, and I'm really excited to see his own journey. You know, he's only 41. He has a lot of life ahead of him, and I look forward to see what he's going to do.
We mentioned Harvey Weinstein earlier. There's a spotlight on sexual harassment, sexual assault, and how men can flagrantly and horrifically abuse their power. Companies still approach sexual harassment in confusing ways. How do we put clearer guardrails around what is tolerated, what is not, and what crosses the line?
I think there are two really important issues here. One is to end the cult of the top performer. You know, there is this cult both in Silicon Valley and in Hollywood and in many other places around the world, where if you are delivering results, if you are delivering great performance, a lot is forgiven you. And the other thing that is really important is for us to break the silence, because people see things and they don't say anything, especially if whoever is involved is someone in a powerful position. And we see that in politics also. I'd love to see more Republicans speaking out about what's happening at the White House. So breaking the silence before there are a few courageous people, like the courageous women who came forward in the Harvey Weinstein case, before it has to come to that point.
You mentioned politics. You speak about an inclusive culture at the same time that our own president seems to be very divisive. What are your biggest concerns now that we're 9 months into this administration?
Well, my biggest concern is that so few Republicans are speaking out. It was great to see Senator McCain last night speaking out. Of course, it's been great to see Senator Corker speaking out. But I think it's so much now up to Republicans, because this is not a partisan issue. It really involves the safety of the country, and we need Republicans, as well as Democrats, of course, but Republicans will have a lot more impact if they speak out about what is happening.
Facebook, Google, and Twitter are now having to answer to Congress about Russian meddling on their platform. What is the responsibility of these companies when it comes to foreign actors weaponizing, essentially, the tools that they create?
Well, as Sheryl Sandberg said to Mike Allen during their interview last week, it's very important to increase oversight. I mean, Facebook is hiring 4,000 additional people. They're investing more in machine learning to be able to catch, first of all, the creation of these fake accounts, because whatever you think of free speech, nobody wants to see fake accounts being started in order to interfere in our democracy. But I think there is another problem, which is what we are addressing at Thrive Global, which is in the attention economy. A lot of these companies have the incentive to hijack more and more of our attention. And we see that having incredible problems, especially when it comes to teenagers and college students. We saw the article in the New York Times over the weekend about the mental health problems among teenagers increasing dramatically.
So, Arianna, you're announcing a partnership this week with Samsung to turn a smartphone into a dumb phone. What do you mean by that?
So for specified periods of time, when you're having dinner with your family, when you're doing deep work, when you are sleeping, when you don't want to be interrupted, you'll be able to put your phone in what we call thrive mode. And during that time, you will not be able to receive texts, notifications, calls. You will have a VIP list if you always need to get a call from a child or a spouse. You'll be able to do that. But the two important elements of the app are, one is bidirectional. So if you are in thrive mode and I try to text you, I'll get that message back and will be told when you'll be out of thrive mode. And also it will give you a mirror of your social media consumption. So it will tell you, you were on Instagram for 7 hours last week. Would you like to reduce the amount you spend on Instagram or whatever app? And if you decide to, let's say, reduce it to 6, it will give you notifications and then shut you out.
So what's the next step with Thrive? Where do you want to take this?
So Thrive is really two things. One is our work with corporations. You know, we go into companies, we work to improve their culture, improve outcomes in terms of both productivity and well-being. And also we are a media platform which increases awareness around these issues, both by bringing together the latest science and also new role models. There are a lot of people who actually are practicing taking care of themselves, recharging, and then are seeing the impact this has on their productivity and their performance.
So how are you splitting your time now between Thrive and Uber and everything else?
Oh, Thrive is really my job. You know, now that now that Dara is in place, my role at Uber is very much reduced to being a board member. I think between the Susan Fowler blog and Dara starting as CEO, it was a very, very intense period, especially because I chaired the board committee that oversaw the Holder investigation and then the search committee to find the CEO. But I'm happy to say that with Dara in the San Francisco headquarters, life has changed.